Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of The Practice. This show is an unrehearsed look into my workflow. My name's Stuart. I'm a 3D artist, designer, and illustrator, and your pal, and I'm excited to have you back for another episode this week. This week we're sort of picking up a little bit where we left off from last week, but I think we learned a few things last week, and I know we're not going to get as into the weeds and as complicated as we did. If you caught that episode, you may have learned that I was maybe not 100% satisfied with the way it turned out. So with this one, what we're doing is we're still using Adobe Fuse to generate a fairly realistic human form. And we're popping over to Mixamo to rig it and start posing it. And this week, instead of just doing just using it as a posing method, this time I want to use the animation, come up with a little run cycle here. So as you can see, I've got my brutish, enormous, muscle-bound male, and I'm applying some animations here, choosing one, downloading it. I think if you've watched this show at all before, you're probably pretty familiar with this process, so I'm not going to explain it too carefully. So now we're merging that new file that we downloaded into Cinema 4D. And this is where things are going to get a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting, in my opinion. So, this guy's super realistic, and we're treading into the uncanny valley here a little bit. And I do like the ease of use for creating these forms in Fuse and Mixamo, but I don't like the super detailed version of it. So you can see what I did was turn down the normals a lot. I turned down the image map that's in that features all that super realistic skin and everything like that. Another thing I do a little later in the episode is actually add a smoothing deformer to it to even further kind of blend down some of those details. The other thing I'm doing here, and I think this is really where I'm drawing a lot of inspiration from last week, is having a little fun doing a super simple stylized face sort of overlaid onto this body, right? So we've got sort of the best of both worlds here in that we can generate a realistic human body to use as a starting point for this character model, and then we can add really a lot of character and interest just by putting our own finishing touches on it and making it a little more stylized or colorful or whatever suits you. So I love these big sort of goofy facial features, so I'm sort of adding those in, modifying the base model as needed. And you can see that we're still, a lot more realistic now than we actually wind up, landing in the final animation. See here, we've gone pretty far off course now with the color. We're really gonna lean into this saturated palette, have a bit of fun going, kind of a little bit abstract. I don't know if abstract is the word for it. Maybe stylized is a better word for it. Continuing to add primitives and additional details to this face. I want it to be really simple and streamlined, but to still have some personality. So some of the features are exaggerated, obviously, and I think with a body like this, a big, like, kind of hulking body, it makes sense to have really kind of large and exaggerated facial features. They seem to match in terms of their personality. And so what's great is you can use, and we'll get there in just a minute, but you can add these, facial features and then, insert them into this animated rig and have it follow along with the body. And I'll show you some techniques as we get a little bit further, and not only how to get this face to move with the rest of the body, but to add, to rather easily add some movement to the face itself and have it kind of jiggle and bounce around with the rest of the animation. So we'll get into that. So you can see there I'm actually adding that smoothing deformer and further simplifying the way the body looks. It didn't match so well, all the realistic details, and it's really, I think, about getting the level of detail and the sort of simplified graphic nature of the face to match with the body. And it would be kind of tricky to do that by hand, I think, but the smoothing deformer is a really excellent way to do that. And you can adjust almost like you would transparent layers in Photoshop. You can sort of adjust the degree to which it simplifies that base mesh. Really making that brow line kind of prominent. And at this point, this character is sort of reminding me of, I think it's like Panthera, Panthero or something. One of the characters from the Thundercats. If you can think of the name of that Thundercat, drop it in the comments below. So here, in terms of really going simplified and making this, a fairly simplified animation, I thought it'd be cool to just overlay the character onto a color that's darn near exactly the same color he is, right? So we've got sort of a tone-on-tone look that I think looks really sweet. And since he's sort of jiggling all over the place, spent some time sort of getting him centered. I sort of had to average out the location of his face across the entire animation, and we go through and tweak that a whole bunch as the episode rolls on. And here it dawned on me that, much like, I guess, a normal realistic human, the models that you get out of Adobe Fuse are not typically perfectly symmetrical. So I noticed that there was some sort of asymmetries here that were exacerbated also by the rigging, because of course he's moving around slightly off center too. Because I think the Mixamo animations are generated using like true motion capture. So those suits with all the little dots on it in a big room where the actual, the motion of an actor or a model is super accurately captured, which is pretty interesting stuff. But that will, part of what makes it look so lifelike are the little asymmetries and super realistic motions. But when you're doing something as graphic and simplified as this, it's nice when things are centered. Obviously, if you throw things into a symmetry object, they're going to be perfectly centered. So I had to sort of tweak things and get them to a comfortable place without it being, mathematically centered, so to speak. The other thing I'm doing here is adjusting. I'm adjusting a lot the contrast in ambient occlusion. I actually make that sort of a light pink color or a light blue color, and that takes off some of the hard edges from some of the shadows. I'm also, adding some lighting here and turning global illumination way up, which helps get a little bit more of a flat color. The other thing I've done here to achieve sort of that flat look is you can see I have the luminance channel turned on. So I use the same color in both the diffusion or the color channel and the luminance channel. And when you do that, you can sort of adjust the brightness of that luminance to take away from any shading to sort of the level of your taste, which I like to do. And sometimes I try to differentiate my work by not having a super shiny octane style renderings. I like to have things be a little bit more flat at times. So the other thing that I've done here, which is kind of funny, is I've put not only have I put the face inside of the skeleton rig, I've also put the camera in there. So it sort of follows the character's face in a funny way. It's almost like the style of animation or of recording you'd get if you had a selfie stick and you're recording yourself as you were running around. I actually wound up kind of liking that effect, so I kept it. Threw it in there, sort of as a just out of curiosity, really, at first, but wound up keeping it. The other thing I'm doing here is adding, as you can see, like this jiggle deformer to different pieces of the face, and those will actually react realistically throughout the course of the animation, in that they will sort of use momentum to move and push move and push individual elements at the height or at the highest or lowest point of the animation. So things will sort of follow through in a realistic way and kind of jiggle around. And you can adjust the amount to which they jiggle. So some of the facial features I have moving around more than others. So for example, the lips and the eyebrows I have moving around a lot more than the nose. But adding jiggle to those facial features, even to a subtle amount, gives you a lot of sort of variation and interest in the animation. And that can be a little bit tough to see here in the time lapse, but you'll definitely notice in the final animation. One of the last things I'm going to wind up doing here is also adjusting the lips and adding some actual like opening and closing into the lips. And so what I do there is actually turn on point level animation, which is this little tiny, let's see here, I should turn it on soon. It's this 3x3 grid of dots in the bottom right hand corner underneath the timeline. And what that allows you to do is actually keyframe points along a spline, which is super useful when you want to animate lips that have been built in a really basic way like this. So you can see I've gone and clicked on point level animation here and just did some simple keyframing with opening and closing the mouth. And now that we've got the eyebrows moving around and a little bit of a blinking effect going on and the mouth opening and closing, there's, the facial animation feels much less stiff. And sort of matches the movement of the upper body that you have in the other parts of the composition. I decided, I had the lips in yellow for a really long time there. I decided they were a little bit too contrasting. We're taking away from the rest of the face, but I really liked that hint of yellow in the piece as a whole. So I went and added this rather gaudy piece of jewelry and was really satisfied with just the effect overall. Now, I didn't like the way ambient occlusion was happening in that necklace piece, so I wound up just putting on a compositing tag onto that and just turning off ambient occlusion so that it would stay just super bright and really, really graphic. I just wanted this to be like a band of yellow. And I wound up there thinking, hey, we could add just a little bit of a subtle pattern. So I threw some stripes on the necklace. And that really gave this sort of like a tribal or like an ancient old school kind of feel. You can imagine this person like living in some ancient tribe perhaps. And you can see sort of how this piece is an evolution of last week's. Certainly not the same. And, I think we learned from what we did last week and grew a little bit and got rid of what wasn't working. And I think what wasn't working was just all this sort of fussy and overly complex detail. And what was working was sort of that funny facial feature and the simplified facial features, I should say, and the sort of tone on tone treatment of the body against the background. So we updated that approach and really leaned into the things that worked well over last week. So it's an evolution. It's all part of the practice. And sometimes it takes getting through a really rough practice to get to something that you appreciate much, much more. So even if you're not pleased with the last one you did, make another one. It can only get better, right? So as I've been jawing away over here, you'll notice that I've output the final set of renderings, or frames. I've rendered out the final set of frames. We're just getting in here for just a little bit of Photoshop touch-up, but you can see the animation really is where it needs to be as a whole. I'm just bumping up some of the values and saturation here, tweaking the colors just a little bit. And what's great about this is having minimal colors allows you to export a GIF that has a fairly high pixel resolution and a fairly low file size, just because really color count really counts against you, let's say, when you're exporting GIFs. The fewer colors, the smaller the ultimate final size. So the smaller the ultimate file size, I should say. And so here we're going through the the save as settings and exporting a GIF with various levels of lossiness and color. I always really want to keep that dither high and the lossiness down. You'll notice how quickly the quality drops off when you start adding lossy compression to it. So if you can, it's good to get away with that. And with this piece, we only wound up needing, 64 some odd colors. So here at slow final speed is the finished piece. Love the colors, love the facial expression, love the simplicity of it all, and had a lot of fun making it. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you next week. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe. If you have any further questions, don't hesitate to drop one in the comments below. If you want to keep up with me and the work that I'm doing, please check me out on Instagram at DLGNCE. And until next week, this is Stuart saying goodbye. Thanks.